song that never ends. It goes on, my friends. Some people started singing it not knowing what it was, and then they started singing it forever just because this is the song that never ends. It goes on and on.
Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments. I am your host, StuMTG, and as always, I'm joined by my other two most amazing hosts.
Hi, I'm May, also known as Magic.
And sitting next to me, ever present in their studio.
The guy that calls himself Uberbear, because Stu promised me we're going to use like pseudo names on episode number 1. Turns out he's like, I'm just Stu, and I'm like, hi, I'm Anthony.
The Just Stu moniker has been dropped for some time now, and I don't know where that really came from. It's kind of nonsensical.
You did it to make fun of the fact I called myself Uberbear while we were recording.
No, it was definitely nothing to do with Uberbear. But Uberbear, obviously, the podcast is called UberCube, which was how you originally came, to me with the idea, and we've just been running with it now for all this time. But look, it's always going to be amusing to me that everything is Uber something. The UberCube podcast.
Yeah.
Uber Bear.
Yes.
Uber Bear's Horror Cube. It's just part of the personality of the podcast. I think
it's Super
awesome.
Bear.
It's Super Bear?
Yeah.
It's Uber Bear?
Super Cube.
Stupor Cube?
Stupor Cube.
Stupor Cube.
Anyway, all right.
Enough insanity. Well, it's new set time. Again.
Again. Oh my God. So welcome to Murders of Takir Manor. I don't even know where we're at anymore.
Murders of Modern Horizons.
Plain,
Tarkov
I don't
Manor.
Murders of Modern.
Murders of Modern. I like that. That's pretty great. So, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about Modern Horizons 3, and we're actually going to we're not doing a set review, but what we're going to actually speak about is a few of the cards that I'm actually adding, and some of our anecdotal nonsense as we move through the episode about what cube it's going into, the why, and then we'll do some challenges as we do, but, we avoid set reviews like the plague. It's not our jam here at UberCube. We'll let the others take that one on. But before we go any further down this conversation, we are going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube. We're going to enjoy our libations of the show. And let's start out with the lovely May. What are you having on this wonderful Friday afternoon?
So I'm having a brand called Horseshoe, and it's a mule cocktail made in Iowa. It's a raspberry mule flavor with raspberry vodka, ginger beer, and lime.
Back on the mules, eh? I'll love to hear it.
Nice.
As we discussed recently, you're always going to be the Moscow Mule gal. Okay, you're always going to be.
So we're actually having something a little interesting today. It's Birdsong Brewing Company out of Charlotte, North Carolina, makes a jalapeno pale ale. And interesting fact about me, whenever I brew, and it's been a little while since I've actually did some home brewing.
It has been a while.
But I do enjoy infusing all of my beers with habanero or jalapeno, like whether it be raspberry or not. And I actually was inspired from like this S-tier brewery in Lincoln, Nebraska called Kincaider. It's the coolest place in the world. And actually their flagship beer there is in fact a jalapeno pale ale, which actually is surprisingly way better than this Birdsong. No disrespect to Birdsong, but oh my God, best beer ever. And so I've been trying to clone it. So every time I see a little spicy beer, I grab it because it's great for the summertime. So
well, let's crack this one and see what it's all about.
All right.
Modern Horizons 3.
Mm-hmm.
The latest, the greatest, another set.
Let's rip the Band-Aid off of this one. Let's just do it.
It's so pushed.
Let's rip it off.
So, pushed? A Modern Horizons set?
Pushed.
No.
So pushed.
Really?
I don't know. No. I got some very strongly mixed feelings on this one. But I remember when Modern Horizons 2 came out, and it was devastating to my checking account. As in, every card in that set was so ultra pushed and had a home almost everywhere I went. And if you didn't have it, you were almost borderline made fun of by my friend circle. Why aren't you running Ragavan, or I think it was Fury and Ren 6 and Grief. It was absolutely insanity.
Yep.
I do not have, going straight with the listeners, do not have that same feeling. Matter of fact, I've actually, being completely honest, I've hit a wall on purchasing power at this point. I have now, everyone gets this, every Magic player feels this, but I have now hit this limit where the influx and the inrush of constant sets have, frankly, the well's a little dried up for me right now.
I think certainly, right. And let's take it from like a power vintage all the way down through the rest of your cubes, right? And I do agree that there's going to be a level of expectation within your play group that if you are presenting a vintage cube, it should represent the top tier, the best of the best, right? I will say that years and years ago, I would have asked that question like, hey, why are you not running this? Look at this cool new card. It really should belong in here. But now you're absolutely right. There is this just rapid release of all these sets. And because, as May mentioned, this is push, right? There's plenty of push cards in this set. And it's not just these Master sets or Modern Horizon sets or anything like that, like these supplemental sets. Every set now seems to have these push cards, and whether they're pushed for a 60 card format, whether they're pushed for Commander, which certainly it seems to be the case, there's just so many cards that are so strong and deserve a slot, if not in your Power Vintage environment, then certainly in one of your other environments as well. And I can just imagine even just from a cost perspective, right? Ignore just the constantly having to update all of your cubes and constantly having to go through all the lists and does this fit? Does this push an archetype too much? Is this going to cause problems throughout the rest of the list? I can imagine it being a little tiresome eventually, where you just feel like it's not just one 360 or 540 card environment that's been impacted by these sets, combined with the expectation of the play group. You've always felt like you wanted to kind of keep up, if you will, right? And check out the new toys and include the new additions, right? Why not? This is what makes Magic fun and exciting, and what is some part of what makes Cube exciting is these new changes and new cards. But eventually, when it's just rapid fire, bang, 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 every few weeks or whatever, it's just, like I said, it's just got to wear out eventually, right?
Yeah, and actually, I'll present this to May as a follow-up when I make this statement. It is once something's working and it's functioning, I think us as curators now get this option to choose now, right? Like, I'm going to go with, if it ain't broke, you don't have to fix it, right? Sometimes that does matter. How do you feel about that statement in terms of your cubes when you get, let's say you go to Lorwyn? How do you feel about that idea?
I mean, what's hard is that with a lot of the sets coming out, it's really hard for me to pick cards that would even fit in my environment, not just in terms of like the flavor restriction and looking for specific party members. And it feels like that they have been pushing a lot of cards that are weirdly specifically good in the Fate Cube. But, like, the only card that was even remotely eye-catching for me was Sneaky Snacker, which is blue and a black for Fairy Rogue, 2/1 flyer. Whenever you draw your third card in a turn, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Compared to everything else going on in this set, this is, like, the most tame thing.
Right.
And that's the only card I can consider, is just this one odd common Fairy Rogue.
I saw that whenever it came out, and I'm like, well, there's a card. And I didn't even know if it was really even relevant to your environment. It's neat, the art's really cool, but I thought about you the moment I saw that card. So I think you came out pretty fortunate. And I had this feeling, kind of this behind the scenes, fingers crossed, that this set would not appeal to me. I kind of did this whole preordained kind of thought process anyways, frankly, because the rest of the world is struggling, right? Our economy is struggling, households are struggling, pockets are struggling right now, and people just don't want to spend more money. So when I knew that Modern Horizons 3 was coming out, there was definitely a part of me that was really like, please, I'm like the little kid in left field, please don't hit the ball to me kind of thing, right? Because I'm thinking the whole time, please don't be the knock it out of the park. Please don't have the Ragavans and Furies all over again. Because I know I'll have the potential to cave into that financial pressure to make those purchases. So I'll have to say that the one thing, the saving grace for me, is this set hasn't really allured me in such a way. It hasn't made me feel that. The only cube that I have 8 cubes, and I've thought about this a lot, and we have an example of it just from last night. The only cube that I feel like is drifting on tectonic plates and changing and extremely hard to balance, and it's a known quantity, is my artifact cube.
Yeah.
It unbalances itself and unteeters itself. A single card can break that environment, whereas the other ones can kind of just organically absorb it. Like, I can put a really powerful card in my vintage power cube, and it can just try to mix into it just mashes in. And it'll go a little unnoticed, if that makes sense.
I think what's particularly difficult with the new sets is that it's not necessarily that they're just making more powerful cards, but they're just taking concepts that we've had before and then just making them pushed. Like, for example, I didn't see Nethergoyf on your list for cards to talk about, where it's a 1 black mana, star, 1+ star, and it does the Goif thing of, hey, its power is equal to the number of card types, and its defense is equal to the defense plus 1. Or equal to the number plus 1. I can speak. Plus, it has escape. So not only do we get Tarmogoyf, but we got it as a 1-drop in black, and it's sticky.
So yeah, they even got one that's like a fire goyf, or I don't even know the name of it. It's a red one, and it's basically like a FTK. And being frank with you, as I look at these cards, I just think to myself, that's cool, but I'm quite content with FTK.
There's a silver lining. We're making Lurgoyfs great again.
We
right?
are, in fact.
Lurgoyf.deck is going to be a thing. I don't know if it's in Modern. I don't know what format it's going to be in. But I'm going to put this out there now. Someone is going to build a 60-card Lurgoyf.deck, and it's going to be sensational. I don't know how powerful it's going to be.
But do you feel a little bad for Hans in this situation?
No.
No.
Not even a little bit.
That's a lot of running.
It is a lot of
Hans.
So much running on.
But yeah, it's truly incredible how we can get so many of these pushed versions of cards that's already existed. And it's hard to show you Nethergorth and be like, why is this not in your vintage environment? Because, well, not every good card needs to go into your environment.
And that's kind of the tilt that I have here, is I finally just said enough is enough. It's the frequency of releases that come in such a pattern and the changes. I was just changing cards today. And I'm thinking to myself, other than some tuning, and it's even happens in my commander decks where I just quit building new commanders for the same reason. The oversaturation of the commander market made it so that I never wanted to invest again. I simply will just take the ones I have and just make them better going forward with the occasional upgrades.
That can also be a bit of a problem in itself, though, right? Because then it just becomes, rather than, and you look at our play group, right? We've still got people in our play group that build commander decks. We've still got people that post in our Discord or reach out to us, however, like, hey, I've built this new commander deck. Is anyone interested in playing commander? It used to be that the power level was kind of a known quantity, right? That you could kind of get an idea of how people were playing and, hey, I've built this deck. Like, okay, tell us what the vibe is. And, okay, I can kind of see where that's going to fit in the spectrum of all of our decks. Once you get to the point that people stop building commander decks, right? And I will say that I can't remember the last time I built a commander deck. It's been forever. But now the only motivation for me, if I was to ever improve my commander decks, would be to buy better cards. And then it just becomes power creep. And then it just becomes, how more streamlined can I make all of my decks? And I don't want all of my decks to just be on this even power band, right? Sometimes I'm absolutely like, let's play commander because I want to play till turn 4 or turn 5 and then we shuffle up and play again. Sometimes I don't mind playing 10 turns and a game goes an hour. And I'm known for not really enjoying long commander games. But now we're talking about this from a cube perspective, right? Do you want these cubes to be living cubes where they change from an environmental, from an archetypal, or that kind of perspective, or do you just want them to become more powerful over time?
Yeah, I've actually started stepping away from the overtime statement. I want them to be more flavorful. I want them to have repeated fun. I want to have more Jenny Johnny brain incorporated in most of mine. I don't want linear gameplay style. And what I see with a lot of the cards that come out in these new sets, and this one in particular, is they took a pip off of something. And suddenly you may have something before that did the exact same thing for 2 pips. Oh, but now you can do it for 1 pip. And for me, that's just not enticing any longer, because that's all it is.
Do you remember when 3 mana used to be a creature that came in and everybody sacked a creature?
Yeah, that's a good example.
And it's what now?
Fleshbag Marauder.
Do you remember when Fleshbag Marauder was the standard, right?
Yeah.
3 mana, everyone sacks a creature. How is it 2 mana now with a piece of gravy or with a little bowl of gravy and some salt and pepper on the side that it's not even limited, or it's the limitation of, if you want to call it that, oh, I can sack this token. Now it's also sacking a non-token creature.
It's hyper pushed.
It's a little on the push
But it's
side.
also not, to me, that doesn't increase the fun factor of the card, because sometimes the experience of Magic, for me personally, is about the complexity and about, going the distance to get your mana out and making these decisions. The hyper efficiency of Magic cards sometimes for me can detract away from the mana base being important, or taking your time to build up to a strategic play, or you understand what I'm going.
I'll be honest,
evolving board state.
I don't understand the design process. I don't understand where that has been the standard for such a long time, that during the design process, someone thought, you know what, let's push this down a pip, right? So it's 2 mana instead of 3. And there's a condition on it because it's non-token that actually makes the card better. Like, I don't understand if for any other reason other than let's push this to make it more efficient, to make more players want it, why that gets through the design. I don't understand it. It's a better card, sure, money. Okay. It's money, right? Push sets, more people buy them, more money, but they don't make sense to me from a design perspective. I'll be honest, I just don't understand why decisions like that are made. I don't get it.
Why spend a lot of resources, time, and whatever paying a designer team to come up with some interesting multi-text design like dungeon or whatever to have the player base complain about it, when you can just take the same old cards that people already like, make them better, put it in a package, and call it a day? Money!
Yeah, it's a little bow on it. I get that. And before we actually start going through to discuss some of these cards for the various cubes, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you flat out, there won't be any energy cards on my list, even if they're self-contained and capable of producing their own energy and doing their own effect, basically engine in a box type thing.
Sure.
Not even dealing with it, because previously in both my artifact cube, in addition to my power cube, in the way back, I tested energy in that one. And then we're going to talk about devoid in my power cube, kind of in the same sentence. You won't hear a lot of that come across the table either for those reasons, or rather colorless pips matter type situation. Going to the power cube, I remember I put in all the pain lands at one point, and because it was a neat concept, it was an interesting way to go with stuff like, what was it? Reality Smasher, and what was the one that stripped your hand?
I couldn't tell you.
It was interesting. They had some cool cards, and even some of the Kozileks and stuff like that required those costs, but ultimately they felt trappy and they felt foreign, and they required special waste in there to play it. And I just didn't, it took away from the power cube in my circumstance. And then going to the energy aspect, when my first iteration of the artifact cube, it was during Kaladesh and it was under supported. Now we've got, what do we got? Fallout that's now pushed out energy. Now we've got Modern Horizons 3 that went bonkers.
As well as all the obvious like mirrored in stuff that provided a fair amount of support for it as well. But yeah, you're right. There's been so many themes within the sets that push sub-mechanics within that overarching theme, right? Like treasures. We've brought up treasures on more than one occasion, right? Treasures have become a very, very pushed, or have been in previous sets, right? You cast a spell, create treasures. A creature attacks, create a treasure. It's like, I'm not a pirate. I'm not out searching for treasure every 5 minutes. What's the deal?
So my Monopoly cube's looking for treasure like nobody's business. Now that's pretty important because the whole context of that environment is based around that. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. But let's just kind of get into that. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of these cards. And we're going to do this kind of categorically. And so the first card that I'm having this list, what I'm going to tell you in the beginning is, am I adding it right now, or am I adding it later, or am I not at all type of situation? So right now I'm going to go ahead and say this one's going to be a later situation. I want to see some playtesting from others. I'm willing to wait and not go to that optimization. This card appears pushed, appears optimized, having a hard time reading for the community. People are all over the place about the strengths and power levels of these cards. And the first one's going to be Tameo, the Inquisitive Student. For 1 blue, you get an 0/3. Legendary creature, Moonfolk Wizard. Flying, whenever Tameo, Inquisitive Student attacks, investigate. Whenever you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile Tameo, then return her to the battlefield, transform under her owner's control. And then she flips over to a Planeswalker, which is going to be Tameo, the Seasoned Scholar, who's going to start out with 2 loyalty, Legendary Planeswalker Tameo. +2, until your next turn, whenever a creature attacks, you are a Planeswalker you control, it gets -1, -0 until the end of turn, or -3, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it is a green card, add 1 mana of any color. And then -7, draw cards equal to half the number of cards in your library, rounded up. You get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size.
All right, so before we go any further, there's something that I want to point out that is important to this, right? There's a lot of text on Tameo Inquisitive Student, on the cast side, if you will. There's a lot of text on the Planeswalker side. 1 mana.
Correct.
1 mana.
No
Not
cost.
2 mana, not 4 mana. 1 mana with a relatively straightforward way to be able to flip Tameo, right?
Correct.
Literally, Island, Muck Sapphire, cast Tameo, Brainstorm, job done.
Correct.
What the heck?
It's insane.
7 sentences.
7.
Yep.
Seven sentences for 1 mana.
I will be the first person to tell you that you can run this with, it'll be any kind of your draw effects, right? Anything that says the word draw in a brainstorm is the perfect example here.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And it will probably show up in Legacy and stuff like that because of that. Ultimately, this comes down to, I acknowledge this card is fantastic, but I just updated my cubes with the OJT, or was it OJT? Not OJT. It was Outlaws, whatever.
Junction.
They're on the job training is what we're going to refer to as the. But I just put cards in there that were fairly pushed. They're actually aggressive and tempo based. This is kind of like the amalgamation of some of those cards we've seen, that blue tempo flyers, and now you've got this Thraben Inspector tacked onto it that's kind of repetitive.
It's,
but it has no associated cost to you. You're just playing Magic, and you've got a defender out the gate.
You do. And it's, to me, this is extremely like mid-rangey, right? It's a very, very prototypical Simic card, right? It's rewarding you for drawing cards. It does give you the ability on the Planeswalker side to be able to impact the board. You've got the whole return target instant or sorcery card, which is a blue/Simic kind of thing. It's not going to win the game by itself, but the value for 1 mana is just absolutely through the roof. It's just completely bonkers to me. And I actually appreciate it from a design perspective. Like, I think it's kind of cool. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I can see it being put in the Vintage Cube. I'd love to see, like, hey, this is what I'm going to replace with it. But I don't know. May, you tell me how you feel about it.
Just real quick, let me toss this in. Chris and I were having this conversation last night about that pre-release FOMO before the sets came out, that need to make that purchase out of the fear that the price of cards would go beyond your reach. That always happens, right? In the beginning, like Jace Riven's Prodigy or
Jace Riven's Prodigy,
something like that,
JVP.
right?
It was $100 and something card at one point.
And these type cards where if you didn't get, or even Ren 6, we'll use that as an example, which you've joked about that on numerous occasions.
We did, yeah. I paid $100 for Ren and 6 when it was still, before it got banned out the wazoo everywhere. Now it's a cheap card. But yeah, I had the same kind of FOMO, right? I wanted to buy one.
It's the FOMO because I thought it would become out of reach pretty promptly.
Sure, yeah.
So in the second one, I had that feeling, right? When these cards are coming out, people are losing their minds because they've broken all these molds. Well, this one, I think the mold has been cracked. And while I do acknowledge that this card currently right now, US $40 is as of today's date, and for the foil it's pushing around 80, sometimes more. There's that potential that, that get-in price is $40, that this could become a $90 card, just like Shielder did. That's what happens with these cards. But I think at this point now, I'm quite content with not making that purchase. It's not going to do anything that's going to change the way my powered Vintage Cube plays.
It's not, no.
And for that matter, my Fem Cube, which I want to have Tamiyo as a representation, but I also don't want a dual-sided card in there again. So these are all the complexities that we weigh into. How do you feel about all those thoughts, May?
So I do agree with not wanting to add the double-sided cards, just because that can add a lot of complexity and play patterns that's not particularly interesting. I also think that, well, you mentioned, Anthony, where it's not really a card that adds anything interesting or complex or out of the box compared to what's already in your environment. It's not really adding much to your environment to add in there outside of the fact of, yep, it's a good card, has lots of text, it's 1 mana.
Agreed.
Great. What a card.
That's
this is
basically
certainly the
what it
card
comes
ever.
down to, is it's...
So pop quiz, without looking at the card, can you tell me the second thing on that Planeswalker text and what it does?
It returns a spell. That's about the highlight of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it has so much text.
A lot of text.
It's interesting. I'm not...
And it's...
And the fact that it says green card on it does push that Simic threshold. It encourages you to want to be Simic. That's what's neat about it. It's a neat card. It does a lot. I'm just not in the market for it. I don't need it right now. Maybe
I think
if it tanks, maybe.
People tend to make the mistake of when it comes to new sets coming out of, oh, I have to strike while the iron's hot. I have to get them while they're cheap, whatever, without realizing these prices are volatile. They are speculative and they have not equalized yet. And when you are trying to pick cards for your cube's not going anywhere. Prices are going to go up and down. What's going to happen when Wizards prints the next 1 mana, 1 drop, let's say Delver of Secrets, right? Just Delver of Secrets with Infect, right? Some stupid thing like that.
Don't give them any ideas, May.
My point is that it's only a matter of time before this gets replaced with the next big thing, and its
Agreed.
price comes down,
Yeah.
and it's totally fine to wait.
And what's
that's
interesting
the advantage
about
of being a cube curator.
this one too is it's a secret commander set, right? And the commander market is not slowing down. That train is just speeding up more and more and more. Those rails are on fire, and this is going to get bought in mass, right? Packs are going to get cracked all over the place. These cards will depreciate. They just will. Not all of them. Maybe not Tamiyo, because they may find legacy and vintage homes over time. They always do, legacy homes. But you can see where cards like this, it'll become a dime a dozen after a while. That's
I don't know.
point.
I don't follow the legacy or the vintage metagames like I used to. I used to be very, very knowledgeable about them just from I used to consume content like crazy about them. I still enjoy watching legacy and vintage content, but it's been a while. I couldn't tell you if there's a shell out there right now that is going to really see or is going to desire to put Tamiyo in there, or the next card that we're going to talk about in a second. But this is the thing now. This is 2024. It's not 2014 or whatever. You don't need a card to be super powerful in standard or modern for it to be a card that has a ton of value, right? Like you mentioned, Commander is really the biggest push, or one of the biggest pushes when it comes to the desirability and therefore the cost of the card. And I think it's hard to deny that anyone who's looking at a card like that and thinking, man, for just 1 mana, I can get this card that's got all this potential value on it. Why wouldn't I want that?
Here goes another card, kind of falls in the same vein. This card's kind of the one that everybody's losing their minds about. This card is pushed, and I'm going to go ahead and add another caveat in front of this. I'm just going to wait. I'm not feeling this card like the rest of the world is. Once I explain to you all the rhythm of how this card might play out, you'll understand why people are high on it. And I'm just going to say that the cost is very prohibitive right now, and it's actually not going to change anything either. And it's going to be a Johnny Nakatal Pariah for, you get 1 colorless and 1 plains. You get a legendary creature, Cat Warrior, for a 1/2. We'll just say when a Johnny enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 white cat warrior creature token. So now you're getting a 1/2 and a 2/1 on ETB. Whenever one or more other cats you control die, so you're going to want to kill this cat, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you may exile a Johnny, then return him to the battlefield, transform under his owner's control, which switches over to a Johnny Nakatal Avenger, which is a 3 loyalty planeswalker, a Johnny. +2, put a 1/1 counter on each cat you control. All the cats, right? Unless you're heavily supporting cats and or this other cat you have happen to survive. You can see where that's problematic, right? And then 0, create a 2/1 cat warrior creature token. So it does fuel its own cat synergies. And when you do, if you control a red permanent other than a Johnny Nakatal Avenger, he deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to any target. So that's quite powerful. And then -4, each opponent chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. For 2 mana, we just got all this nonsense. This is another one of those hyper push cards. This goes good with Broadside Bombardiers. Gut will like this and does check all these Ajani boxes. And again, I just don't find it personally interesting. It's not making me go burr, as May says.
I would agree.
I just kind of like and I'm going to tell you it's about $40 right now. And to get the foil, you're looking at 80s and 90s again.
Yeah,
US.
I mean, that's kind of, it's a similar price for both of those cards, right? So the big vendors are going to say, right, 40 for the non, 80 for the foil. From just a pure power perspective, you're getting a 1/2 and a 2/1 for 2 mana. That's pretty good. And like you say, the ability to be able to sack the other cat or even just block with the other cat, decentivize your opponent from attacking under the threat of now you've got a flip to Johnny Planeswalker that only costs 2 mana, that has the ability to go off pretty good, like a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control, which who knows, I mean, in the Vintage Cube, you don't have a single other cat, at least not in white. I don't know if there's any other cats in there.
Loris?
I'm sorry?
Loris?
Well, Loris is white-black. I'm just talking from a pure white perspective.
Oh, gotcha.
Purely in white. But yeah, expand it out. I don't know what you've got in either white or black or red or however it expands out.
We'll bounce down to the card here. Oscillate Pride is actually the one that people are also high on.
Well, let's talk about this one. So this is Oscillate Pride, 1 white for a creature cat. It's a 1/1 with first strike and lifelink. It has Ascend, which is if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. At the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then you have the City's Blessing. For each token token you control that entered the battlefield this turn, create a token that's a copy of it.
Which makes food and clues and
Sure does.
treasures.
And more
This
cats.
is just Scoot Swarm, but cats.
Yeah.
What was this? Cute Mob? Whatever the one is where it just gets out of control.
Scoot Mob was the OG one.
It's Scoot
And then
Cat.
Scoot
It's
Swarm,
Scoot
yeah.
Cat.
But it's Scoot Cat, yeah.
Yeah, and
Cute
it's
cat,
awesome,
Scoot cat.
and you can see where like you got a Johnny, and that's some crazy synergies. And again, I guess it's for me. This is again, it's the ever changing, updating, getting the foil type thing, and that's my personal little battle.
That's a U prop. The whole getting the foil thing is a U prop.
yeah,
Let's
but
put this out
eventually
there.
you do. And what this reminds me of, it was the Eternalized Cat. It was the 1/1 double striker for Amaket or whatever, the Amacat, that whenever it died, you could Eternalize it and bring it back with double strike. And it kind of was in there for a minute and a half and also kind of felt asleep and a little boring after a while. This is neat. I'm just not, this doesn't bring me any, this doesn't make me go nuts, right? I'm not like, oh my God, this is going to replace something that I have to have it. This is not going to unsettle my environment. It will not be missed.
I agree, and I mean we can go back to the Ajani as well. Whether or not either of these are going to ever see play in your vintage cube, I'm going to hazard a guess that they don't, and not just from a because of their power level perspective, but I actually think they're not because I just think that you'll not end up being interested enough in adding them. If that makes sense, I think that's probably ultimately what it's going to be. And they're cool cards. Like, I that's all I see them as. They're cool cards. That's fine. I don't see them as any greater than that.
Let's switch gears to something I am excited about. I got two of them on here that we will talk about that I'm legitimately like, okay, now you've got an interesting card. In Fanatic of Ronus, for 1 colorless and 1 green, you get a creature snake druid, 1/4. Tap, add 1 green mana. It has Ferocious Tap, add 4 mana. Activate it if you have creature 4 or greater. Bill's going nuts for that idea.
Yes, he is.
And then you have a Eternalized feature on this, which makes it into a 4/4, and it, pay 2 green, and you kind of bring it back as a zombie. Like, this card is actually dynamic and interesting.
Which then, obviously, we don't need to mention, but you Eternalize it, it becomes a 4/4, so now it taps
checks
for 4
itself.
because it checks itself.
Yeah.
Pretty strong.
No, I think this is fascinating. Actually, this is something it's early game, late game, get you started. Nice blocker against an aggro subset.
I think it's a great card.
And this is about a $10 foil. That's a whole different, and this is fascinating in itself, right? Like, it's not punching my wallet, but this card is neat and enables things. It will make a difference. How do you feel about this one, May?
I mean, I like it. I'm trying to remember the specific card name, but there was another one that does a similar shtick, but it only gives 2. Also the Ferocious, but instead of giving the 4, it's just 2. This one has 4 and Internalized, and that other card was already something that I put in some environments. Like, it's crazy that we can have a 2-drop 1/4 plus several sentences worth of text with no downside.
Yeah, I find this more interesting, like, and say, what is it? Was it Wall of Roots or something like that? Or another mana dork I could replace this with and be quite comfortable with it. Because it kind of shuts down aggro. It allows your mid-range to start building up, and it takes you to a long game strategy.
I think that's a great point. The whole green being very much solidified in that mid-range, right? Or has great place in combo as well. I think green is in a very good place right now in the Vintage Cube. But this just does tick a lot of boxes, and I think that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, this is one of the cards that, like, when I'm looking at the rest of them, I'm like, wow, this actually does a unique strategy, right? It wants to do something, and a lot of people would want this, even if they're using it for the colorless. They won't care. It just does a lot.
It does.
Yeah.
And like you say, mate, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's no downside. Even just as a 2-mana dork, right? And typically, all right, you can look at your 1-mana mana dorks and say, well, do I want a Birds of Paradise or an Elvish Mystic or whatever? But you've got a big body, right? Or at least a big, thick defender with 4 toughness.
Snake.
Thick snake.
2
Thick
C's
druid.
and a Q in there.
4
somewhere.
C's. We're going 4 C's on the thickness. And you put tapping for 4 green mana, even without the Eternalize, even if you just have another large creature, like play it and just level up a Hex Drinker a few levels, and now you've got a 4/4, and now I've got the ability to tap this for 4 mana.
So I'm actually going to disagree with you here. I think the fact that it has internalized is what makes this card so much more pushed compared to what other mana dorks there is. Because one of the biggest issue mana dorks has in a lot of environments is the fact of, okay, cool, I just played this cheap thing that generates a lot of mana, but now my opponents are incentivized to remove it.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree 100%.
This now can come back as a 4-drop 4/4.
I agree. The Eternalized is the push part. No argument there from me. And like I say, I think it's just going to be super easy to drop it in any green deck. Green decks like having a lot of mana. I suppose you can say that any decks like having a lot of mana, but why not?
Yeah. So, yep.
Hope
if
you have
anybody's
swords.
wondering, this has been ordered. I'm okay with ordering this one.
I like it.
This next one's actually exciting for me too. It's Ghostfire Slice for 2 colorless and 1 red. You get an instant and it has Devoid, so it has no color. This spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent controls a multicolored permanent. Ghostfire Slice deals 4 damage to any target.
Hang on,
it's an instant.
3 damage, right? For 1 red, it's 3 damage. That's the standard.
Right?
There's no way we've got
No.
4
It's-
to any target.
So you've got like this Flame Slash, and you've got Char with no downside whatsoever. You even have something that says, because a lot of cubes are really leaning into the multicolor aspects. A lot of curators are pushing that envelope of now doing 3 and 4 colors because they want to see more than that.
At least it's mythic rare. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's uncommon. Oh, that's correct.
my God.
It's uncommon as well.
So I pre-ordered this
Wow,
today.
what a
Guess
crazy
how
time.
much I paid for this in foil?
50
This
cents.
is a case
50
where
cents.
commander cards kind of push themselves way too hard into the other environments in a way that's just kind of not intuitive. Intuitive is not quite the right word, but I think that you're gathering what I'm saying. Where this is a card that reads, hey, there is no reason not to play this in commander if you're in red, right? But in a lot of other environments, now you have to consider, okay, how many multicolored cards do I have? How often is the multicolored card going to be the relevant target? Insert list of considerations here. How many good targets at 1 mana do exist, and how often is that going to be applied?
Yeah, I mean, in Commander for sure. I mean, this is... there's never going to be a consideration for me that I'm ever going to have trouble casting this for just 1 mana to do 4 damage to any target. It's going to be every game, and early in most games as well.
Yeah, this card's push. Like, everybody should have this.
Sorry.
This is 100% powered vintage cube, but this is also 100% any cube. Like, this is a fair Magic card that just gets better whenever you're running multicolors. I mean, it's great. This is probably one of the S tier cards out of this set. And it's so benign, so innocuous, people are probably just glancing right over it because the Johnny and Tamio are screaming at you with those pretty price tags. But these little 50-cent cards are the ones that are sneaking in there, and these are the ones that are going to make a difference in games, in my opinion. Like, these are
I agree.
relevant Magic cards.
I agree. I think 50... I mean, I guessed right. I said 50 cent. It might just be an uncommon. But these are the kind of uncommons that I think are very, very pushed, not super expensive, and they're going to see a lot of play.
It's going to see a lot of play. So this next one's kind of an interesting one, and I have not ordered this yet, and I'm trying to evaluate this card. And it's Horizon of Progress. It's a land. You can pay 1 life, tap, add 1 mana of any land type that you control, or that you control could produce. So it's like a reflecting pool, basically,
Yep.
right? And then pay 3, tap it. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. That's interesting. That's some spice there. And then pay 1, tap, sacrifice Horizon of Progress, draw a card. This is a spicy, weird card. I haven't ordered one yet, but I'm debating on it.
I'm less interested in the middle ability. I typically find that paying 3 mana and then tapping it and a land comes into play tapped, probably not as interested in that as I am the ability to be able to sort of use it as some fixing or to be able to draw a card. Obviously, you've got cycle lands and stuff that give you the ability to do that. But I think this is a very, very fair card.
Wizards, finish our Horizon land cycle, you cowards. Oh my God.
It's all text.
We get this middle ground thing. I like it. I think it's interesting. I actually was looking at this one actually for the Monopoly, but actually where that 3 tap, put a land in there has like a positive impact. It's a consideration plus the pay 1 life and copy a thing, and it has buildings on it and structure.
The thing about that with the Monopoly is that if I never feel like I'm never struggling for mana. I will say that. I'm never really struggling for mana with the Monopoly Cube. And that was the vibe that I got when you first introduced it to our group, because I'd seen other desert cubes, right, where you've got to draft all the lands as well as all of your playables. I've never struggled, and I've played that cube on more than one occasion. We've played other desert cubes, And I've never felt that that's been a limitation within either the draft experience or the play experience, that I've needed to spend this land and 3 more mana sources in order to put a land down. It's decent as far as ramp is concerned. Do I even want to say it's decent? I actually don't think it's particularly decent. I think it's very slow. I'm not.
4 mana is a lot to ask.
4 mana is a lot to ask for just 1 tap land. So I think it's okay. And like I say, I really do think the ability to be able to pay 1 life, like the reflecting pool thing, and to be able to sack it to draw a card, I think those are pretty cool. I think it's medium.
I think it's medium. I'm not adding it right away. I'm going to sit on it and see if it's...
if we were to cut out that second sentence, it would have just been a perfectly fine middle of the road land card.
Yeah,
agreed.
But the fact that it just has that for just that extra gravy is just why.
Well, they're doing this with like the Horizons and those taps. Those turn on your Tarmogoyfs and your Deliriums and these type things. So there are, if you're running that type of cube, I can see value in this card, but I've just never gotten much out of Reflecting Pool to begin with. Especially paying one.
Can we talk about the flares?
Okay.
I have feelings about the flares.
Yeah, of course.
So this set introduced a new cycle of free spells, and I don't know how else to explain it, but Yu-Gi-Oh vibes in the worst of ways.
Yep.
So,
and as our resident Yu-Gi-Oh expert, May, let's draw some parallels between Yu-Gi-Oh
for context,
and the flares.
I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh up to 2017. Like, I played all the way from whenever Yu-Gi-Oh like actually first came out, like the first like Legend of Blue Eyes set, all the way up to 2017, and then I just kind of moved over to Magic and never went back.
Smart choice.
And the problem is that now I'm kind of seeing the pattern that I went away from Yu-Gi-Oh for, where we have these Flare of Denial cards, where as a cycle, their gimmick is you sacrifice a non-token creature of their colors in order to pay their cost rather than their mana. Free spells in Magic is a bad idea. It feels like every time that we come to this conversation, we all acknowledge this is a bad idea, but then we keep coming back to it because it prints paper that people want to buy. And it's really frustrating to have Yu-Gi-Oh-esque mechanics, for lack of a better term, introduced. Oh, it doesn't technically put you up card advantage wise. Okay, great, but you're still having to play poker with your opponent, and you have to ask yourself, is that something that you want to curate inside of your environment?
So the flare cycles, they really like play into an aristocrat's idea, because it may mention all of these, you have to sacrifice a creature of the color that's not a token. And that's a real decision to make, and one that's got people's eyes. The red one and the blue one. I don't have the red one on here because I'm just not interested. And in Flare of Denial, for 1 colorless and 2 blue, you get an instant. You may sacrifice a non-token blue creature rather than pay this spell's mana cost, counter target spell. I've already got Pact of Negation. I've already got Force of Will.
Force of Negation.
Force of Negation, excuse me. Yeah, I don't have Pact of Negation, but that would kind of do that too.
Absolutely.
And then you also have like Days, and you have all these. I don't feel the need to have more of this. And then blue is just one of those color subsets where you can't actually capitalize on it because the density of blue in a Power Vintage Cube, in my case, mine, it doesn't have enough unique targets. And for people thinking I can chain, say, Snapcaster off this, you can't.
You can't,
cannot.
But it's interesting that you bring up Snapcaster Mage, because Snapcaster is probably one of the greatest blue creatures ever printed, right? Love me some Snapcaster Mage. I know that's kind of an old school way of thinking, but I love Snapcaster Mage. But it's a fantastic target for something like Flare of Denial, where you've played a spell, you flashed it back with Snapcaster Mage, now you just have this 2/1 that sits on the battlefield, doesn't really, I don't need to do a whole lot else with it. Do I care about it attacking? Maybe. This isn't 2015 Modern Control where I'm just countering everything and killing the opponents with Snapcasters and Celestial Colonnades. Trinket Mage is another great example, right? Pay 3, get my Trinket Mage target. Now I've got a 1/1 creature that I don't really care about. What a perfect card to sack to a Flare of Denial. And and like May said, it's another free spell.
It is free, but I would say in the year of our Lord 2024, as we stand right now, the majority of the blue creatures that I have in my slots are now impactful. As in, they're very choice and they're doing something. I'm dealing with stuff like, what is it, the bird that does the conniving, or I have
Ledger Shredder.
Yeah, I have all the. I don't want to sack these creatures. It
But
have
I'll
to be
snap
dire
a
straits.
Snapcaster. I'll sack a Snapcaster.
It's getting
or a
far in
Trinket
between,
Mage.
though, on the idea of the cards that I'm willing to let go for this. Snapcaster is the perfect creature. You're right.
That's the thing,
But
though,
that's very
right?
niche.
You've just got that option to do so. You're not gonna.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a super impactful spell to be willing to spend cancel, right? Because that's what this is. If you don't, it's cancel. It's 2 blue and a colorless counter target spell. It's cancel, right? But if the play that your opponent if the play that your opponent is about to make is going to win them the game, right? I'm sacking my Ledger Shredder. I'm sacking any blue creature. Who cares whether or not it's a creature that's potentially impactful? I'm saving the game, and I'm doing so from a position where I was willing to commit all those resources to the board and spend all the mana that I could, because who knows what else I've got out there on the battlefield. Maybe
And the worst part is that it feels bad on the receiving end, because your opponents are going to see you overextend. They're going to see you do that, and now the next question they have to ask themselves is, do you have the free counter spell?
Because it's very different.
Can you activate the free counter spell? And is that gameplay that we're wanting to actually curate? Because that always frustrates me as a player, where it's just like, okay, cool, great. Good to know that my opponent can now just extend their board, and I can't punish them for it.
Yeah, and the parallel that I'll draw is Daze. You mentioned Daze, right? Daze has a bit of a unique, well, I suppose Daze and Pact of Negation, but Pact of Negation definitely sees less play as far as vintage.
Are we not talking about foil, which is the greatest?
We're not talking about foil.
We're not talking about foil.
But Daze requires you to return an island to your hand, right? But the limitation to that is it's only counter it unless the opponent pays 1.
And you have to bounce a land.
Force of Will, you have to have another blue card in your hand, right? So now it's a lot more telegraphed if I've got no mana, or I would say a lot more, but at least then if your opponent's got 2 cards in their hand, one of those cards could be Force of Will. And actually that came up yesterday when I was playing against Chris. We were playing against your Artifact Cube. He knew full well I was never committing everything to the board. I always had 2 cards in my hand, and towards the end I was able to hold 5 mana up, and he's like, I know you've got Force of Will, so why I can't win the game? Like, yep, I don't even need 2 cards in my hand anymore. I can commit everything except 1 spell if all I have is that Snapcaster Mage or that Trinket Mage or whatever else is on the battlefield. It's bonkers.
I think
I'm just frustrated because it just feels like
cancel.
another thing that we didn't really need. Is this something that Magic needed?
Nope.
Did we need more of these free spells?
Sure didn't.
This one is one that I probably will commit to the board and actually pick up. I have not yet. I'm trying to make the determination whether or not it's, like Maya said, whether or not it's needed. Yes, it's amazing. Yes, it's impactful. But I already got...
Of course it is.
I've gotten a substantial amount of counter magic already. This is another piece of counter magic that is substantial. Yes. I don't know if it'll be missed if anybody's ever going to ask me, why are you not running Flare Denial? So I think I have time to hold up on this one and pick it up at my leisure. And in fact, I looked at this one strangely enough for the Fem Cube because the actual other printing, the special printing of it, is a woman. And that's we talked about with Emma Partlow. That's what's so neat about building that cube out, is waiting for those unique arts that showcase a woman on them. And this is one that did it. And then since I'm on that tangent, so did Expressive Iteration in this set, which I have my eye on too, now has a woman on it. Now I have to make the decision whether or not I really want Expressive Iteration in that environment.
You should. You should, yes.
I think it would be fun. I know it's a
I'm
great
never
card.
unhappy to see EI.
Okay, but like Expressive Iteration is something that can improve the consistency, adds a fun factor. This is just a free spell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Oh, your opponents are playing blue? Well, I wonder if they drafted it. If they didn't, well, then I just kind of held myself back for no reason.
People are high on the red one, too. I don't have that one in front of me. And then there's also the Flare of Cultivation, which is like a Kadama's Reach or Cultivate. I'm actually quite content right now for holding out and just sitting on my... I know that 3-costed mana ramp spells are no longer in favor, but I do run a Lands Matters package, and I do still have the big squeeze of the green ramp going out. So I'm okay with paying that little Kadama's Reach. People want that sometimes. When they want it, they want it. It's one of those cards at 540, they'll say, this isn't very good, but you'll see players never complain about playing it either, right? They'll still do it. Or Harrow or anything like that. They'll still do it. Nature's Lore. Flare of Cultivation is really cool. I'm going to wait for the prices to come down on these two. Flare of Cultivation, to me, is very Commander-ish because it has that double pip.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is a very, very Commander card. I think if you wanted to put it in a cube where you already have a desire to include that kind of Cultivate / Kadama's Reach effect, I don't think it's a terrible idea to say, hey, I'm going to put this in there and see how it works. What are you going to sack for it? Are you going to sack your Birds of Paradise, your Elvish Mystic, or whatever the case may be? I think this is a cool card. To me, that having that extra don't have to pay mana for it ability is cool. It's not even in the same stratosphere as something like Flare of Denial, where you're getting to counter a spell.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
And so let's kind of move over. Let's change off the vintage topic for a few minutes. And we're going to talk about this next card that I am, in fact, staring at my vintage cube as well, too, because I think it has a potential place. It's interesting, has dynamic gameplay, but I'm definitely putting it in the Fem cube. And it's going to be Philia, the Exuberant Shepherd. It is
I'm going to bite you.
Yeah, you're going to, but
do not put it in. Please don't.
I have to. It's cute. It's
No,
the
you
bestest.
don't.
It is
No,
the
you
bestest
don't.
girl.
It is so far away from what you need to do.
Well, let me explain why. I have a reason for why. So it's first off, I put in my little.
The point of your cube is to represent women, comparing women with, hey, this dog's also a girl, femme cube.
Yeah, but it's not just for that. That's not. That maybe that banner's gotten a little far out of control. I'm representing all women multi-species. I'm very clear about that, like dragons, etc. I'm not saying that everybody that
but
pilots
dragons
this
have identities. This is a dog.
Yeah,
it's just a dog.
I'm a dog owner. I love my dog. I live through my dog. Odin's my boy. I mean, that's where I'm at. Like, he's part of my life. And so for me, this is a representation of that idea. But we can talk about that off script. But Philia, the Exuberant Shepherd, I see where you're coming from, but for 1 colorless and 1 white, you get a legendary creature dog, 2/2. Flash. Whenever Philia, the Exuberant Shepherd attacks, exile up to 1 other target creature, non-land permanent. At the beginning of the next end step, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it's entered under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Philia.
So it's not creature. Just to clarify, so it's exile up to 1 other target, non-land permanent, right? So that can be anything.
Resets your planeswalkers, does all kinds of stuff.
And I'm gonna say what Bay said. Femcube, I don't think so. First of all, I wouldn't put it in that cube. I would put it not even close. I would put it in the vintage cube. I think this card is absolutely bonkers. Bonkers.
I disagree. It's 100% vintage cube. I've already got my eye on it for that idea. It's way more interesting to me than Johnny. I have a blink package in the Fem cube, and it is a beautiful little girl dog, and I'm okay with supporting that. That is what I'm doing with this cube. I'm not
not comparable.
I guess I'm struggling to understand that, but we'll debate upon that later. But the Evolution Witness is the next card that I have that I'm looking for this cube. And for 2 colorless and 1 green, you get a 2/1 creature, elf, shaman, mutant. And you can pay 1 colorless and 1 green, adapt 2. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put onto Evolution Witness, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. This is a good card.
Yes, it is.
That's a fun card. And this art's gorgeous.
It's not a vintage cube.
No,
let's just push that conversation to the side. But yeah, I agree. From purely a cool card, fun card, I absolutely love this card. Any kind of proliferate you've got in your cube is going to match this. Obviously, I think adapt is actually a mechanic that I really, really do like. Adapt 2 is cool, right? You're now getting a 4/3. I would have liked it if it would have tapped for 4 or 5 mana. I think that would have been really nice. And when you adapt, it taps for like 10 or 12 mana and has Eternalize and Death Touch and Trample and Lifelink. I think that would have made it just a little bit more usable. Yeah. But in all seriousness, no, I think this is a really fun card. I actually think this is a standout for me as far as, and I've looked through this set extensively. I do like this card. This may be one of my favorite cards in the set, and I think it fits that cube well.
It's fascinating. This is actually some thought put into this. What do you think about this card, May?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of things like adapt, monstrous, whatnot. Just because those as mechanics let you have a mana dump later that will upgrade your current cards, and it's just kind of a nice way to get extra value later. My only main complaint with Evolution Witness is just that it has a pretty bad floor.
Sure. It's got a high ceiling, very bad floor.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we're never going to disagree on that.
And I like those in some regards, because are you going to waste, a removal spell on that? Yeah, sure. When the adapt triggers on the stack, makes it a pretty good target. But otherwise, it can be fairly innocuous as just a 2/1. But I think there's, like you say, very, very high ceiling. And the returning permanent card every time you put a +1/+1 counter on it, that's pretty bonkers.
I would agree.
It's pretty great.
Here now is my favorite card that I'm running in so many different cubes. This is my bonker. This is where it's funny. Like, all the uncommons are the ones that are driving me nuts. And again, I want to talk about like my orders I have placed, because I ordered through, and there's no affiliation, but through Star City, because I can get those fast. I'm talking about like $20 orders. I'm going to tell you that with Modern Horizons 2, there was a lot more zeros on the back of that 20. That's the difference in the set. But I'm okay with that. Like, my wallet got a breather. And the uncommons in the set, Chris and I were talking about this last night. This opened up the world for him as far as Pauper and Peasant.
Pauper, yeah.
And as far as Dan goes with the Devoid Cube, this is his set. Like,
yes.
Yeah, May, you've joked about it, like you feel like they've made cards for you. With the Devoid stuff, Dan, I mean, oh my God, the Devoid Cube, I don't even know how he's going to be able to keep up with this. Expensively, secretly and expensively.
Yes.
You're going to need some tax write-offs, Dan. So the Marionette Apprentice is the one we're talking about. For 1 colorless and 1 black, you get a 1/2. Creature, Human Artificer. Fabricate, so that's whenever it enters the battlefield, you can put a 1/1 counter on it, or you can put a servo on it. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. This card is good for my 2-headed giant cube. It is amazing for my artifact cube. And then I put it in my Fem cube for now, because I do run it's a weak Aristocrats package, and I am in test mode right now to see if I like it.
I'm going to put this out there right now. I posted on the Discord earlier today. We played last night. We played your Artifact Cube. I drafted what I thought was a very, very strong deck. When I first put it together, I thought, this is going to be fun. This has got some power to it. I went up against our good friend Christian, who, Lord love this gentleman. We'd mentioned pre-game that we were going to be drafting Anthony's Monopoly Cube, which is a desert cube. So what Anthony had decided on his way over is, I'm not going to bring the desert cube because we really need 8 people, so I'm just going to bring the artifact cube. So our good friend Christian shows up, and then about 2/3 of the way through the first pack...
Oh, no, he's like, the second pack.
Was it second pack?
Mm-hmm. He's like, where are all the basics?
He said, yeah, where's all the basics? And we're like, in the box right there. He's like, no, seriously, where are the basics? Like, they're in the box right there. They'll be in the land station. And I looked at him, and he was sitting next to me. I said, Christian, this isn't the desert cube. This isn't the Monopoly cube. He's like, oh my gosh, my deck is going to be terrible. Because poor guy had just drafted nothing but lands for a pack and a half.
Uh-oh.
Ends up drafting an aggro deck and absolutely wipes the floor
with everyone,
with everybody, like everybody.
On accident.
I play him first round, and it's not even close. And I've got Simulacrum Synthesizer in my deck,
which I've cut,
which has now been cut. So it kind of goes to show my second and third games I played against our good friend Chris and Anthony here. My second and third games, not even close. I had 1 game against Chris where I started with 1 land, kept a crappy hand. It is what it is. But I did a pretty good job of navigating those 2 matches. But my deck didn't have a chance against Christian's deck. And this was a powerhouse. I'm a big fan of this card because I'm a big fan of Marionette Master, which is the sort of the, this is Marionette Master at home. This is only 1 servo. It's Fabricate 1. Marionette Master is Fabricate 3, if I remember correctly,
so
for a 2/2. 4 mana for 2. Yeah. But this card is it's
point
bonkers.
out that it's easy to skip over the fact of whenever another creature or artifact.
The
fact that it works with creatures is huge.
Oh, yeah. And heaven forbid.
It may not be a drain effect like Blood Artist or the Zulaport Cutthroat, but like having just a third one is ridiculous.
You don't even need that because he's creating creature tokens every turn and sacking them to other things that do me damage. So it's like, hey, I'm going to attack. Okay, cool. You've attacked with a 2/2. How much damage do I take? 6. Like 6? Are you serious? And I'm just taking 6 damage a turn for like 5 turns, 4 turns. Like, that was fun.
So Marionette Master's Apprentice.
Marionette Master's
This card is insane, and this is another uncommon. So if you're looking for something that's like innocuous and hidden, I'm telling you, the uncommons in this set are
I was just going to mention that. Are we seeing that as a trend in this set? I'm not as focused on what is common versus what is uncommon as someone like Chris is. Again, he's our pauper/peasant aficionado out there. That would be an interesting discussion point. And I feel like that has come up more and more over the last few years, right? Where oh my gosh, I can't believe they downshifted that, or oh my goodness, look at that effect that's now at uncommon, whereas previously that's kind of been a rare effect or at a rare power level. Are we seeing that more and more now with these master sets, or just with Magic in general?
I'm okay with this. Like, I want to say that for the black bordered foil, I paid like $1.50. I ordered 3 of these, and I'm putting it in 3 different cubes. I know we're talking about the Fem Cube section because it happens to be a lovely woman on there. But in addition to, it's just found a home.
He is saying that a lot, that you're ordering these cards for multiple cubes. Is your goal, let's be honest here, Anthony, is your goal for every single cube to be identical eventually?
No, this is a unique situation here where I'm
being facetious.
Yeah, you are. This one's just such a role player. That's what's so interesting. Let's go back to the Ajani conversation we talked about in Tamiyo. Great cards, powered vintage. People are gonna run them. They're gonna break them. It's going to happen.
I don't know about
that. They are. They're gonna break them. But in the annals of history, will it be remembered? Not so much. These are the little hidden staples that are kind of just coming out of nowhere. Because people get wrapped up in those dollar signs so much, not looking at the lower tier cards, realizing how push they are. I mean, this is where we're at now. We're in the Gonti is now an uncommon type thing, right? I think sometimes when we're looking at spoiler season, I don't get wrapped up in those mythic rares and those rares. I start looking at what has come down a notch. Let's move over to the artifact cube.
So Marionette Master
/Apprentice.
We've
already talked about that.
We've
beat that, but here's a new one. This is a new role player that's now come out. And
I want to talk about this card.
I put it in here just based on last night.
Thank you. So this card is Arcbound Condor. This is 2 colorless and 2 black for an artifact creature bird. It has flying and modular 3, so it enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and then you can move those counters when it dies. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. I'm a fan of anything modular, and I can say quite categorically that I have tried so many times to make the modular work in your artifact cube. There's been times where I have just had the deck of all decks. I'm like, this is it. This is the modular deck that I've been craving my whole life, and it's just not done anything. And then I've played a deck where I'm like, all right, I'm just going to kind of throw modular in as a little bit of a sub-theme, but I'm not too crazy about this deck, and it just goes completely bananas. I think this is an okay card.
I think it's good.
It's a very good...
Yeah, it's interesting. Mishra's Baubles.
It's okay.
I'm going to do Mishra's Baubles and stuff like that, and I'm just going to take out servos. It's interesting.
Yes, it's going to take out servos.
Yeah. The little ones, all the things that you're kind of doing, all that game work, those soldiers and stuff like that are kind of coming out. That's what this is going to do. And this is the first introduction of, unless I could be corrected by the audience to my belief, May, you might want to fact check me because you like to do that here with the internet. I believe this is the first time Black has had a modular creature.
Yeah. Out of the 25 cards currently released that have modular, Arcbound Condor is the only black card that has modular.
Which now plays into stuff that I'm doing because I have kind of changed the game a little bit because I don't want everybody, because again, Uberbear's Artifact Cube is going to be featured at CubeCon 2024. Thank you to everybody that voted for it. I appreciate that. I'm excited, but I also don't want it to be more of the same. I want to change the cube up a little bit. I'm pressing proliferation a little bit more in that cube. I want to lean in because Stu talked about some of the deficiencies of modular. I'm running cards like, was it Drown and Ichor? Stuff like that. And it plays with these type cards. So I think this is an interesting card. What do you think about this choice, May?
I think that it requires playtesting. I think it is a card that might be deceptively good. Like, it has a lot of text, but I feel like that there are going to be times where it just kind of sits there. Sure, it is a 3/3 flyer. And if you happen to have another creature, then it moves your damage over. You retain your damage. Pretty nice. But how often are you actually going to be getting creatures with the -1/-1? I don't know. That we'll have to find out from actually testing the card. So
in this case, the 4-drop section was a Necron. There's very little black as far as artifacts are concerned outside of the Necron decks, where they actually did something that didn't... You know, we've always talked about the artifact cube where everything's either anti-artifact or per-artifact, and this is something I want these type cards that are riding that line down the center where they're just kind of doing functionality. This is just a purpose card. It's an admittedly a filler card, but sometimes as curators we find where, and this has happened in the Power Vintage Cube, where maybe black 5-drops for the longest time were non-existent, and people struggled to get, like when they're trying to do these curb build outs, there was nothing to put there. Well, that's the same thing that's kind of happening in this like devoid of black in an artifact environment where there's just gaps that don't matter, they're not relevant. So for now, this will be a placeholder.
That aren't first pickable.
Yeah, it's going to always happen. I think it's just a functional card. This next one's really cool. We're moving over to the Horror Cube really quick. May, would you mind taking on this first one? I like it. It's memey, very memey, but I like it.
White of the Reliquary, which is black and a green for a zombie knight creature with vigilance. It's 2/2, but it also gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard, which, pretty nice. You can also tap it to sacrifice another creature, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Anytime that I can see vigilance on a creature and a tapped ability on that creature, I'm going to have a good day.
For sure. This is kind of Knight of the Reliquary that got a glow up a little bit, or a glow light up, I guess, because we're in the dark here. But
I think it's cool.
It's
I think
cool.
that it'll fill out that Golgari slot well, and what it does is interesting. It's just not archetype defining by any stretch. It's just a good card.
So in the Horror Cube, we've got some lands that actually do something, right? And they're far in between. I try not to focus on that too much, but it does grab a few of those lands that I do want. I looked at this for just a half a minute for the Fem Cube, and the Fem Cube just doesn't have any defining lands that will change a game. And also, I'm not doing the self-mill factor, so it would just be literally a dead placeholder. But you see what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't a necessity in that cube, and it would not have made a difference.
I will say, I like any card, and it's this search your library for a land card, not search your library for a basic land, not search your library for a land card with a basic type. It's search your library for any land card. And this is something that we've actually talked about on previous episodes. Yeah, it's demonic tutor for lands on a stick that's 2/2 that grows, and you can repeat it.
So
I
like
it.
Sandwich's Bug Cube, or anybody's doing Graveyard Synergies, or if you're doing low-powered Lands Matters cubes, this is actually a really good cube.
I think this is going to see play all over the place. Yeah. All over the place.
I'm not putting this Powered Vintage right now. You're going to have to convince me of that one later. It's questionable. It's interesting, but I'd rather do like Squandered Resources in this spot.
Well, it's got to fit somewhere, right? So if you want to...
Field of the Dead.
Field of the Dead?
Yeah.
Field of the Dead or Valakut, which I don't know if you're still running Valakut in the Vintage
I never
Cube.
did.
No, I don't think I would. But obviously things like Dark Depths.
Yeah, sure.
That
it has a lot of functionality. It's neat. Yeah. I've looked at it. It's a little slow, but it's very cool. And self-mill packages, though, this card is for you. And the artifact, in Uber's Horror Cube, Super Bear's Horror Cube.
Super Bear.
In this case, we actually mill ourselves out. So this makes sense. So the number +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard is very relevant.
Very relevant, yeah.
So this next one I will not steal from Stu. This card, and I'm going to get this amazing skeleton art, but we're going to go with this.
Okay, so this is White Orchid Phantom. This is a 2 white mana creature spirit knight. It is a 2/2 with flying and first strike. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to one target non-basic land, and its controller may search the library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle.
This card's good.
Yeah.
There's certain cards land cards, going back to the white that we talked about, there's certain land cards in the Horror Cube that you do want dead. I mean, either the ones that's self-milling, right? Or you want to kill something that's given a first strike, or Kessig Wolf Run, stuff like that. There is a reason to want to blow up a non-basic in there. It's not just for the greed factor.
Agreed.
So there are some potentials. And I don't run land destruction there. I removed all the strip mines, all that stuff. This is a very on-point kind of card. And the fact that it's flying first strike is just chef's kiss.
I think there's a non-zero chance that this could end up being Vintage Cube playable. I think this could end up being an option against decks that run things like Mishra's Workshop or Tolarian Academy or Gaia's Cradle. Maybe it's a quasi sideboard card, but it's still a 2/2 flying first strike for 2 with, you don't have to destroy one of those lands. It could just be, your opponent's fixing if they're being really greedy and running a 3 or 4 color deck.
Triumphs.
Or a triumph. Like it can be potentially very good against the domain decks where you're really reliant on those triumphs and even the dual lands in order to get all that full benefit. So I think there's a lot of potential. I like cards that have an effect that is relevant as well as the body. And we talked about like the ephemerate kind of effects, right? How good could that be if you're, just, okay, my opponent has got the Gaia's Cradle and they've got, or they've got a Tolarian Academy and they've got like an Underground Sea and that's their one source of black in, whatever they're trying to do. So I think it's cool. Like, do I think it's probably a little sideboardy in the Vintage Cube? Yes. But I think it's a good card. Very good card.
And
clearly, you have to target your own land for those secret mono white landfall strategies.
Yeah, and you can also target the indestructible lands too, like the artifact lands and whatnot, and still get yourself going forward.
That's right.
That's a little secret tech there for you. It's pretty neat.
That's disgusting.
This next one, May, would you do this in your best metal voice? I want to hear some. Party Thrasher. There you go.
I'm not doing that.
For the monster.
1 in a red for a 1/4 Lizard Wizard. Non-creature spells you cast from exile have Convoke. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may discard a card. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library, then choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. I love this card. First of all, it's a Lizard Wizard, which I love me some Lizard Wizards.
It's not King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, but it is a Lizard Wizard.
And the fact that this has the best art of the entire set. Not even close. Just the people, just the sheer horror on their faces where the Lizard Wizard is doing the Lizard Wizard thing. It's amazing. And this is going in the Munson Cube because Party Thrasher is about as metal as a wizard lizard can get on a Tuesday.
I think that it is interesting that he's a red card with a 4 butt for 2 mana.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I like it a lot. I've ordered this one too. What's interesting, you'll see when I keep saying I ordered this one too, these cards are under $10. I'm talking foil. That's generally where I'm landing at. Like, you notice we kind of transitioned from the big glitz of the Tamios and the Ajani, where they're hitting these high marks of $70, $80, to now Anthony is like, oh my gosh, I have spent a lot of money. And, I think these cards are more impactful in the grand scheme. The ones that we're saying, and Party Thrasher for that particular cube is thematically on point, does something very interesting. I think players will find it their Johnny Brains will go burr, as May likes to say. I agree. Right? That's just a fun type of card to work around.
So let's, and now, all right, so the Munson Cube is a bit of a meme cube, let's be honest.
For sure. So
let's go on to a proper cube, all right? So here's what I've been looking at for the Doom Cube. Ooh. I know. So this project that I've been working on for about 15 years now. These are the ones that I've been looking at, and you can tell me what you think. Obviously, this is power level / archetype / environment kind of agnostic right now because no one really knows what the power level or the archetypes or the environment's going to look like. But these are the cards that I looked at as like, from an artistic perspective, I really, really enjoyed how they looked for me for the Doom Cube. So the first one is Grist Voracious Lava. This is a 1 green mana legendary creature insect, but it's got this cool skull and the atmosphere behind it looks very Doom-like. This is a Death Touch 1/2 for 1, not pushed at all. But whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under my control, or under your control, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you may pay 1 green. If you do exile Grist, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. And then it's kind of Grist. It's got +1, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token. Then mill 2 cards. You've got -2, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And then -6 for each creature card in your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 black and green insect. So I really, really like that.
It is the hardest one to actually activate and to flip over of all of them. Even I think there's a what is it? The blue-red is
Well, and I don't know if I need to put something in the show notes for the Doom Cube, but I'm going to, I'll think about it. So as an example, I have in my Doom Cube something like Butcher Ghoul.
That'll do it.
Has Undying. I also have Treacherous Pit Dweller,
That'll do
which
it.
also has Undying. So I've got a few cards in there in the Doom Cube that have either some kind of way that they undie back or a way to bring them back from the graveyard back to the battlefield. So I thought that was pretty cool. The next one that I want to talk about is Corum the Undertaker. This is a 1 Jund, black, red, green, for a legendary creature, human warrior. It's a 0/5. Corum the Undertaker gets +X/+0, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards. When it attacks, each player mills a card, and during each of your turns, you may play a land card cast a spell from among cards in graveyards that were put there from libraries this turn.
So many words.
So many words.
Oh, so many words.
So many words.
It's got hammer with spikes.
And then the last ones I'm going to talk about very quickly. Retrofitted Transmogrant.
So good.
1 black, 1/1 for a artifact creature zombie. 3 and a black to return it to the graveyard from your graveyard to the battlefield tap with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So hello there to our friend Grist. And last but not least, Pyrogoyf.
That was the one I was referring to.
Pyrogoyf. So this is the red one. This is the red Lurgoyf for 4 mana that has all the, power is equal to the number of card types in all graveyards, and toughness is equal to that number +1. And when it enters the battlefield under your control, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. So just wanted to kind of bring that up, that there's cards in this set for everybody. So even the Doom Cube.
So is Doom Guy secretly Hans?
Doom Guy is secretly Hans, yes.
Okay, good.
You've got the identity.
Yeah, I figured it
out. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I felt like it was important for me to sort of relate that Modern Horizons 3 is another one of those sets that we've talked about. It's pushed for this, it's pushed for that. There's these, mechanics and reduction in pips and all that kind of stuff, but there's these real hidden gems out there. And I don't even think these are particularly hidden, right? These are good cards. And I really do think Lurgoyf deck is going to be a thing. But check the commons and check the uncommons, because if you can get your amazing cube upgrades for like 50 cents or $1.50 in foil, they're out there.
Yep. May, do you have any final thoughts on this set?
I think that there are going to be a lot of cards that are going to have a lot of homes in here. Just keep in mind that you don't have to add every new powerful card into your environments. So,
yeah, I think that's actually sage advice, and I'm going to lean into that too. And I'm going to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it one more time, because people work hard to curate their sets, and if they've been doing it for a long time, a lot of them are stable. So you want to be mindful of unstabilizing your environments because you add one card. Stu,
agreed.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's go ahead and this has been the Modern Horizons. I know we chose violence here a little bit, and then we tampered down because it's a long conversation to have, but you can see that, consumer fatigue has come online a little bit now, and commons are looking pretty spicy.
Let's head on over to our ending of the episode. First of all, a big thanks to all of our supporters, whether you're listening to the show, one of our wonderful Patreons, or even if you're just hanging out in the Discord. It's great to have you guys along for the ride with us. We truly appreciate all of the ongoing support from all of you guys. Thank you, and, keep listening, and we hope to keep plowing out the content for you. If you want to get involved in the conversation, come check us out at the Discord, or you can go along to the Magic the Gathering Facebook drafting page at facebook.com/groups/MTGCube with our resident Anthony Adams over here, who is a moderator.
As we do.
As always, if you enjoy the show, please give us a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform. Really goes a long way. Get the podcast out there to the greater community. You can also use our altersleeves.com/UberCube affiliate link for 5% off your purchase. You can also use our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link. Go check them out. Dice bags, mouse pads, all kinds of custom and large volume products available for your Cube or Magic experience. You can always reach us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod, or you can reach us via email. UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com if you've got a longer question or comment about an episode. Again, come check out the Discord, come hang out, get in on the conversation. I actually created a forum recently, which is not something I've done on the Discord before. If you're looking for some help with your cube, feedback, advice, whatever the case may be, come hang out, post a list. We got a bunch of experts over there that will be very, very happy to give you some feedback and help you out as much as they can. And last but not least, come check out patreon.com/UberCube if you'd like to become a supporter of the show. It really does go a long way to help keep the lights on and keep the content flowing. And again, we truly do appreciate all of our patrons and all of our supporters. We thank you very much.
And then other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is...
Stop pushing
Stop
magic
buying expensive
sets.
magic cards, happy cubing.
Happy cubing.